Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How the devil are you? Just a little rant here, little thoughts about non-dualism and the problem of ineffability, which makes it really hard to in our culture for most people because they're of the Western culture and we all speak the same Western languages, and these things are very dualistic in their nature, while non duality is what we call ineffable. And so we're going to have a problem. We're going to find out many issues. It can be broken down, it can be understood. It's easy to understand if you just take a little shift, understand a few words, understand a few ways that we're trying to and not a lot. I think so. Ineffability is the idea that ultimate reality or truth can't be adequately expressed in words. And non-duality, though, transcends conceptual opposites like self versus other, mind versus matter, or subject versus object. So we've got a problem. Non-duality, therefore, is going to run into some paradoxes and contradictions, and it's going to be refutable. And it's not even going to take that long to do that because we're already running into some issues about non-duality. It's dualistic, though. It divides experiences into categories and relations. So any description of non-duality becomes metaphorically true, perhaps, but it'll always be literally false. And so how are you ever going to convey non-duality to someone who is locked into our language constraint, not the eternal? Okay, conceptual dualism is the structural, or this conceptual dualism. Yeah, that's right, not non-dualism, dualism. This conceptual dualism that's embedded in our language is the structural division built into that language. And so what it's mirroring is this subject predicate, self, other, true, false, distinction. It's dichotomous. So contrast and negation. So if I say something is, I'm automatically implying that there's something that is not. So this can create like false boundaries, especially if you're talking about a seamless field of being, because this is a holism. And this term highlights that duality in thought is a function of syntax, not necessarily. We have map territory distinction. The map is the language and concepts, and it's not the territory, it's not the reality itself. So you can speak in dualities or maps, but the holistic totality always exceeds your linguistic reductions, right? And so it's automatically going to be an issue here. So what can we do? Like, what are we supposed to do about that? So we have to understand paraconsistent logic. So, well, there's a few things we have to understand. Descriptions are discrete. That's what descriptions are, to discrete. Reality is continuous. It's everything. It's continuous. Description, discrete, limited. So let's talk about dialetheia. Dialetheia. Dialetheia, or complementary, or was it complementarity? Complementarity is like dialetheia. These are philosophical terms. So dialetheia is a statement that is both true and false. So this is oftentimes used in paraconsistent logic. Mysticism refers to this a lot. So it's used to express paradoxes like form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And why this fits is because it acknowledges that apparent contradictions may be true at different levels of abstraction and ultimately collapse into a unity from a higher non-dualistic view. That's what that is. So not, our concepts put things into ciphers and containers. We're the ones that divide things up with our language. That's the way we evolved. That's the way we relate to the greater reality, is through this limitation, through this duality. So duality is an experience of limitation, but it's the only way we're ever going to find meaning in the world is through duality. So duality is very real because it has very real consequences on your emotions, on your feels, on your perceptions, in your reality building in your mind. All depends on duality. To advance in science depends on dualities. To speak, for me to even have this conversation and speak to you, depends on duality. I'm the speaker A and you're the listener, right? There's a duality, and I'm already engaged in duality. But there's non-dual semantics too. Transconceptual awareness is what we can call it. So this is a recognition that concepts are simply pointers, not these ciphers or containers of truth. And why it fits is because this modern philosophical term, used in like integral theory and also in our consciousness studies, this captures how dualistic expressions can be functionally true while failing to encompass totality. So the term ineffability captures the ultimate limitation of language. That's what we mean by ineffable. Conceptual dualism, though, describes the structural problems. So conceptual dualism, embedded in our language, talks about or reveals these structural issues that we're going to run into. But apophatic or transconceptual expressions will offer the solution through non-dualism. So I could say language, bound by conceptual dualism, can describe aspects of reality, but never the seamless whole. That's the ineffability of non-duality. True statements about opposites are only locally valid, never holistically complete. So that's what we're running into. That's really the problem in a nutshell. It's all language and not understanding, not taking the time to really observe the nature of consciousness in some of these other sort of issues that exist, like conceptually. And that's how you sort of discuss metaphysics, because it's not a science thing. It's not a thing that's supposedly out there. It doesn't even start with that premise. There's nothing to observe from a third person. Consciousness is subjective by nature, while science is objective by nature. So these are kind of hard to talk about ontologically, right? Ontologically primary means, in this sense, that conscious experiences the fundamental reality, and matter, space, and time are appearances or expressions within that experiential field. So here's a bunch of terms I've just thrown out at you. But this, at any rate, this is a metaphysical claim, not an empirical one. But we can ask, does the scientific evidence fit better with consciousness as a derivative of matter, or with matter as an appearance in consciousness? So that's where the reasoning begins. So let's do some internal critiques. That's how we do these metaphysics, right? So let's look at the tensions between with empiricism and materialism. Let's look at these tensions within itself. So, for example, maybe the second biggest problem that most people understand, or most people see it this way, is that quantum measurement problem, that measurement problem. Physical states remain indeterminate until observed, suggesting that observation, an act of experiencing, is somehow involved in the manifestation of physical reality. So, do minds interact with the environment, or are they somehow our minds outside of time and space, or are minds interacting with reality? They interact with reality, of course. And if they can interact with reality, they can be entangled with reality. There's an entanglement situation. We can look at the double slit experiment. This whole thing can be accounted for through the measurement problem. And this kind of flies in the face of materialism in a way, because they don't think that consciousness could collapse or have any effect on physical reality whatsoever. So then we have really the main problem, at least in most people's mind, is something called the hard problem of consciousness. So neuroscience correlates brain states with experience, but correlations aren't explanations. How physical firing patterns produce subjective experience remains completely unaccounted for. And then we have the regularity, of phenomena, you know, that, it seems like reality is intelligible to the mind, which seems oddly congruent with a mind-like source or structure. There seems to be some sort of demodulation of our minds with reality. And at face value, you can say, oh, I'm just looking at an outside world, but that's just a huge begging the question, a huge assumption built in to the statement like that. And we're looking at, we're going deeper, and we're seeing a problem because our minds are congruent. And why should it be that way? That's the question. Why should our minds, if they are the product of blind processes, then how is it that we're able to make sense of the world and make truth statements and talk about reality at all? How are we conscious at all? These are questions that materialism has to face. The rise of participatory realism or pan-experiential theories. So there's a number of respected scientists and philosophers that are exploring frameworks that naturalize experience rather than eliminate it altogether, like the illusionist brand of materialists, for example, or the strong emergent people, or the weak emergent people, or whatever. But we have John Wheeler's participatory universe, which says that observation is not that passive act. The universe requires observers to come into being as we know them. Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory, IIT, suggests consciousness corresponds to causal integration, and it implies consciousness is a fundamental property of systems, not in emergent illusions. And they have tests for that. They have papers on this, peer-reviewed papers. They're one of the more popular theories of consciousness, actually. It just takes consciousness as a given. And they look at systems and how they can harness or propagate consciousness. It's totally in line with idealism, but not necessarily with materialism. In fact, last year, there was a big, huge letter in the scientific community. A bunch of materialists wrote a huge letter trying to get people to stop supporting IIT as pseudoscience because it flies in the face of their favorite philosophy or metaphysic, which is materialism. Science isn't supposed to be about metaphysics. It's just supposed to be observing things. But what IIT, the observation it makes, and the implications have metaphysical um, implications, perhaps. Supporters like Bernardo Kastrup support IIT, and he's an idealist. He's an analytic idealist, and he proposes that the universe is the activity of a universal consciousness. Individual minds are dissociated alters within that field, and that works perfect with Giulio Tononi's integrated information theory, and they all work together. You can look at Christoph Koch, who works with Bernardo Kastrup on videos and things like that, and they talk about it. So this is another example. So what I'm bringing up. Donald Hoffman is another guy with his interface theory of perception. He argues that what we call the physical world is a user interface, an experiential representation evolved for survival, not a direct depiction of matter itself. So while none of these really prove idealism or non-dualism, they do scientifically motivate the hypothesis that experience could be hypothetically fundamental and transpersonal. So you have this intersubjective coherence as empirical evidence as well. So science is already resting on the transpersonal consistency of experience. We call this objectivity. So we call something objective precisely when multiple subjects report the same experience under the same condition. And this regularity that experience aligns across observers implies that consciousness is not solipsistic, but it's lawfully structured and shared. So empirically, we already work within what we could call a shared experiential field, the universe as the intersection of lawful experiences. That's what I mean by that. Evolution and cognitive science, it shows that organisms evolved to model and navigate a stable experiential environment, not matter in and of itself. It doesn't care about what something is, of course. It only cares about what works. Can I navigate environment? And this goes all the way down to the cellular level. So someone would say, well, why, Scott, is it not proven yet? Why is it not proven? Well, like I said, science by design is methodologically materialist. It measures third-person observables. However, experience is first-person subjective reality for people. So science can correlate, model, and infer, but it cannot directly first-person experience itself, at least not yet. That's not a flaw. It's just the methodological limit. If consciousness is indeed primary, then the scientific method is one activity within consciousness, not outside of it. So the scientific evidence can cohere with non-dual or idealistic interpretations, but it will never conclusively demonstrate them, just as it can't conclusively demonstrate the independent existence of matter, for example. It can't do metaphysics. Like I said, it just can't do that. So, let me just kind of go over this. So consciousness, well, let's do a reasoned synthesis. Like, we can summarize the current evidential situation like this. Claim, consciousness is primary. Not directly provable, but consistent with quantum and philosophical evidence is what the evidence would look like. The claim, consciousness is private and isolated. This is empirically false. Experiences correlate and obey shared laws. Experience is lawful and structured. This is supported by science, like through physics and intersubjectivity. The world is the objective pole of experience, supported phenomenologically. So this is coherent with participatory physics, like the double slit experiment. So in summary, science cannot yet prove that experience is ontological primary metaphysic, but it can't prove materialism either that way. It can't prove any of that stuff. Materialism is not consistent. It has so many problems within the materialist matter, and explaining matter has problems within the paradigm of materialism. In fact, under materialism's or under the scientific method's own experiments, matter breaks down. Its limit is 10 to the 33, 10 to minus 33 centimeters, the Planck scale. That's when there's, time, space, matter, all works great until you get to that point, 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. That's when show's over. It's no longer, so it has no standalone existence. It only exists past that point. Past that point, it's just an abstraction. So science cannot prove that experience is ontologically primary, but the failures of material reductionism, the participatory structure of physics, and the lawful coherence of shared experiences all point towards the possibility as a serious, empirically motivated hypothesis. And so that's one that I lean towards for all those reasons and for experiential reasons themselves. And that's just the argument. That's how it goes. And that's to explain exactly why it may be hard for me to explain non-dualism to someone who may not be familiar. They may not be familiar with these sort of philosophical ideas and concepts. And that's fine. And I can understand why there would be a tension there. And there would be some seeming contradictions. We have to look at paraconsistent logic and take into account that, it's real easy and fun to say, A is, A is A and not A at the same time and same sense. The laws of logic, you can stand on those laws of logic as if, it's unmovable. And you can create all these dichotomies based on it and how you can parse out what's what and come to some intuitive belief from it all, But that's not necessarily going to work when you consider things maybe you're not aware of, like paraconsistent logic, like non-duality, like these concepts, these internal problems with materialism, and this consistency with non-dualism. When you don't consider all of these things, you may be limiting your concepts. That's all. This is just another alternative of looking at it. I don't really mind what a person believes or not, but everybody wants to argue for something, or they want to defend their point of view in this dualistic reality, and so I'll play the game too. So hopefully it's helpful, though. Hopefully this opens up some questions you might have. And if you do have any questions, leave them in the comments sections. Come to our show every Saturday. I think this Saturday we're going to try to do it a little earlier because we have no, we're going to be at the same time. That's right, 12 o'clock. And we've got Objective Ethics, the new co-host of the show, will be joining us every first of the month, beginning weekend of the month. I look forward to that, and we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and transhumanism, AI, the effect of technology onto society in general. So I look forward to that conversation. That's going to be this coming Saturday at 12 p.m. Central. So please like and subscribe so you can be alerted for when our shows, come on. Please like and subscribe. We're trying to build out a community, trying to have conversations, and have fun in the process. Have a good time. So yeah, man, we will see you on Saturday. And until then, ciao. Y'all be good.